Okay. I'm Toby Reid from Nervegna Reid, and this is Peter Hogg, my friend from PH Architects. Good evening. So the Quaker Centre is, well, it was a centre for all of Victoria's Quakers, and they're a Christian group, but not all of them believe in God. They're basically a peace-loving group, and they wanted the centre to be a place where they could promote world peace.
And if I can just say,
Yeah.
they're basically a highly non-hierarchical religious order. There's no formal structure. Everyone is equal, and they operate by consensus, which means decision-making can take a long time. But
That's right.
when they finally reach a decision, everyone's on board.
So, and this is Bob, who is his wife, Laurel, was one of our main contacts on the building group. The site is in West Melbourne, just on the edge of the city. It's a triangular wedge between the two city grids. So we spent much time with the Quakers looking for a good site in which to house their activities, and we helped them find this one. And we partly liked it because it had the triangular geometry. We felt like there was a lot to work with. It's right next to our office. And this is it here. Do you want to point, Pete?
Yeah.
So you can see the triangular building. But it's very much, we were thinking, how do we design a building in keeping with Quaker philosophy? And we thought the sustainable thing to do was really to keep as much of the original building as possible and to drop in an interior.
So 1960s office building, formerly a funeral parlour actually, and then converted to an office building.
Yeah, so really it's a very subtle, almost banal exterior with just hints of the interior, like you can see through the window here. And we dropped in the main worship space. You can see here, big steel structure. I've craned it in, and I'll try to animate this if we can. Yeah. And so even though there is quite a big structure on the roof, which keeps the place weatherproof for the worship, it's really not noticeable when you're at the site. I mean, you can see it from RMIT and different parts of the city, but it's actually, and it looks like a primitive tent almost in the city, but it isn't that noticeable.
Just go back a second.
Oh, sorry.
Just to point out, directly across the road is St Mary's Star of the Sea. This is actually an Opus Dei Catholic church, and they see themselves quite in opposition to this in many ways as a sort of quite a different religious community to that represented by St Mary's.
Yeah, so this is Dale, who's an atmospheric physicist in one of our client group, and they made it quite clear that they didn't want any normal religious or church signs or tropes. They almost wanted it to be an anti-church in that respect.
They talk about their as a meeting house rather than a church. It's sort of lacks all the sort of formal hierarchies that a traditional church like the one across the road would have.
Yeah, and there was a big column in the middle of the space which really stopped them meeting because they actually meet in circles. And the peace sign with the Q has become their kind of sign as a group for the friend. They call themselves friends around the world. But also the circle has traditionally been part of the Quaker symbolism, a very important symbol within the Quaker religion.
And obviously has lots of antecedents in earlier religious architecture, for instance Stonehenge, places like Göbekli Tepe, the Pantheon, etc.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of non-hierarchical space.
That's right. We consciously made the circles within the space non-hierarchic and shifting to allow for different circular groups in the meeting space, because they always meet in circles. They sit for an hour in silence at the start of the meeting, and depending on the size of the group, they can sort of shift the circle wherever they want within that space.
And in their view, only God is perfect, so to have the circle can't be, it's sort of emblematic of God and higher things, but it cannot be perfect in itself.
That's right. Yeah. And we also saw it as a way of denoting the space, the shift between the grids, because the two boundary walls correlate, one to the city CBD grid and then one to the Hoddle, the Hoddle grid of the larger Melbourne suburbs. So this almost works like a kind of corkscrew or something, a sort of a pivot really between the two geometries, the two grids. Yeah, and there's a long history of that within architecture, but like in San Vitale and Ravenna and places like that. But we posed ourselves the question, and with the clients too, of how do you make a sort of architecture that represents Quaker philosophy? And one discussion we had with Dale in particular was about the astrophysicist Sir Arthur Stanley Eddington, who had the idea of the two tables. Everything, all objects are duplicates, and we have the real table and we have the ephemeral scientific table. And that sort of led us into this idea of the sort of ordinary and the sort of physical, scientific, spiritual sort of realm, okay? And we didn't want to make a sort of circular room, we just wanted to have an object. Okay, you want to say something?
No, we better move on.
Okay, oh my God. Down to the ground floor, so you can see we dispersed the ground floor, which is a library and other rooms for the kids.
Library seat.
Okay.
Entry foyer, existing stair, existing ceiling, sort of expressing the two grids.
And we really tried to keep it like an archaeology exercise where we exposed parts of the old building, the history in a very honest way, and then just inserted different parts of interior objects and surfaces. And they didn't really want a slick corporate interior. They were quite adamant about that. What they wanted was something quite alternative in that respect and rough as well. So that's the triangular end of the site where it comes to a point. And they wanted a very strong relationship with the sky and what the future planting that will happen outside the window there.
So obviously this recalls things like the oculus at the Pantheon and that connection with, in a naive way, the sky as representing higher things and God, and also the use of light to represent the numinous and the sacred.
And also more modern examples like Marcel Duchamp's anemic cinema, where you've got like different circular rotations. Balcony. That's Laurel, one of our clients. That's the client meeting towards the end of the project. As Pete said, every decision has to have 100% consensus. And so we had many, how do I do this? we had to get 80 Quakers into this room, into the old room, and everyone had to agree on what was happening.
They seem to be
very happy with it.
Happy with it now.
Yes. And there's the tent in the city, sort of ancient form of architecture. And there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.